Right. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. This is our March 2025 session in Columbus Sitecore user group. We are very glad that Sebastian agreed to do this presentation. I don't think there is any introduction needed for Sebastian. Everyone in the community knows him. He is in Sitecore, and he talks about XM Cloud quite a bit. And you can go to Sitecore Discover channel and you can find his presentation, his video, and he contributed a lot to this community with the recent, presentation and articles and whatnot regarding Content Cloud. XM Cloud. So stage is yours, Sebastian.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for having me. And I think it has been a while since I joined your user group, but it's great to be here again. Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Few general things. This presentation is not that long. It originated from Symposium last year, as you can see. So by then we had 25 to 30-minute sessions. Let's say we have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. I'm pretty sure if you are lost at a certain point of time with the slides, just jump in. I will not have an eye on the chat, so you need to speak up. But yeah, if you have a question that needs to be solved immediately, let's do it. Other than that, I just go through the slides and we can handle all your questions at the end. All right, so let's kick things off. Welcome everyone to this session about building multi-site implementations at scale with XM Cloud. Even though Himadri said there's no introduction needed, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sebastian. Right now, I'm a technical product marketer at Sitecore. I have had several roles at Sitecore or also outside of Sitecore. I originated from customer side. So I've worked for a Sitecore customer before for quite some years before I joined Sitecore. I'm in IT for more than 20 years, half of it within the Sitecore ecosystem. I was awarded twice for with the Technology MVP award before I joined Sitecore, approximately 6 years ago now. Yeah, but now let's go into things. I believe many of you are working for big enterprise companies that offer services or products, and also your organization might be separated into independently working, for example, brands or regions. And let's assume you have markets across the globe, and we know that every region or country works slightly different, right? So targeting audiences in Japan is different from targeting audiences in the US. So dependent on the level of autonomy of your regional offices, every office might run their marketing campaigns and activities, and all of them have set up their own channels. And this can be quite costly when summing everything up, as every entity is developing their own website, their own social channels, and all of the separate activities that they're running. Now, wouldn't it make sense to consolidate efforts centrally and offer streamlined solutions to every regional office so you can cut costs on development, you can cut costs on hosting, basically, and also on licensing? But now you need a vendor that can handle all of that. And, well, probably not a surprise for you, but Sitecore has been strong in serving enterprise companies with solutions at scale. It has all XP and XM has been leading the market for years, and now XM Cloud continues on that route as a SaaS, meaning a software as a service offering. So let's have a look on how we solved serving the SUGCON sites with XM Cloud and what tools helped us, because we were in a very, very similar scenario compared to the one I described before. We know the Sitecore community is a huge asset for Sitecore, and since 2014, the community takes the effort of running the Sitecore user group conference, or short SUGCON, and the next one is already next week in Europe, in Antwerp this time. But it started in the Netherlands in 2014, and then North America joined in 2015. India became a regular place for SUGCONs. since 2018, and also Australia, New Zealand started having SUGCON since 2019. And of course, each event is different. We have different organizational teams in the regions. We have different agenda, dates, locations, sponsors. And besides social media, websites are still the place to get all the required information. So where to get tickets, who's speaking when, what are the dates, are there special discounts for hotel bookings, and so on. So way back, we built those websites in different Sitecore XP instances, one based on Sitecore 9 using Azure Web Apps, and one on Sitecore 10 hosted on AKS. So exactly what I described before. And yeah, all sites were apparently independently managed with each organizational team. Now, in 2022, XM Cloud was quite fresh, and we wanted to gain knowledge about it within the developer advocacy team, and ideally by implementing a real-world project. So yeah, so we took a look at the SUGCON sites, and beside those SUGCON sites, we also wanted to manage the MVP site within XM Cloud. So having one solution, one XM Cloud instance, but independent front-end head implementations to serve the autonomy of each site. So yeah, so the MVP site got implemented using .NET Core as a front-end framework, and then the SUGCON sites got implemented using Next.js. And then there was also the SUGCON umbrella site that you find under SUGCON.events, and that was later added just as a static HTML for now. The build and deployment pipeline was realized using GitHub Actions, using the XM Cloud CLI, and all the different rendering, and all using different renderings or editing hosts. Now, however, along the way, maintaining these sites, we learned that the SUGCON sites were never designed differently, actually. But as an outcome of having 4 apps serving 4 sites, or 4 head implementations serving 4 sites, with the same code base just copied, whenever we found a bug, we also had to fix it 4 times. So we wanted to be able to maintain additionally the umbrella site using XM Cloud, and that's where we started to think of, in 2023, we started thinking of re-implementing the SUGCON sites, but having just one app serving them all, because yeah, they never were differently. Now, we targeted the SUGCON last year in Europe, in Dublin, in April 2024. And we wanted to rebuild the SUGCON websites using, again, XM Cloud, but this time with the approach of having one app, again, Next.js. We still wanted to use Vercel as a front-end hosting. And of course, we had a team of community members with different roles, some more front-end focused, some more experienced with the Sitecore ecosystem. So a very general project setup with very general requirements. And all other sites, we wanted to gradually migrate as the events appeared along the year. One thing was very important. We did not want to harm the existing sites, so the traffic should still be served by the old sites to the point when the new sites take over and yeah, be successful. And we wanted to set up the new sites then along the other ones, and then switch the DNS at a certain point of time so that the traffic is routed to the new ones. And then last but not least, of course, decommission all the old sites and apps whenever the other sites showed being successful. So why am I telling all of that? To just summarize, there are already 2 ways that you can think of architecting your multi-site solution code-wise, which we tried with our 2 implementations mentioned before. So you can have a dedicated app per site, and then a dedicated Vercel project per site. And this allows having very, very independent development of each site, and that can make sense, meaning you have independent UIs and you require different functionalities from your sites, but also you might end up having potential duplication of code. Or you go with the second option, which is having one app that serves all sites, but then each site still hosted on a dedicated Vercel project to handle the traffic. And this way you have a unified and centralized implementation of sites that shares commonly the same UI, design, and functionality. And this approach definitely allows a simplified maintenance in terms of coding, but also build and deployment. Yeah, there could be, so there's no best practice in here. And there could be good reasons to go with either the one or the other way. You can also mix both approaches like we did, because if you remember, we also have the MVP side, even on a different front-end technology, but within the same solution. So that works pretty fine. Just think of how different are your requirements per website, and if you want to go either with the one or the other solution. Now, I mentioned in the previous slides also build and deployment and all of that. We will look into that in a separate chapter of that presentation. So once you build your application and maybe rolled out your first site, then you probably want to roll out more sites. So let's see how XM Cloud supports that. So no matter if you do a regional rollout or relaunch of your brand sites, usually you start with one website, which is kind of your MVP implementation. And once that is successful and you gain knowledge, you're ready to roll out the other regional websites or brand sites or campaign sites or whatever you need to roll out. So therefore, you create usually a template site from your first website that only contains what's most common across your sites. So you have a good starting point with least efforts, meaning you don't have to create sites from scratch each time. And then you start rolling out new sites, one by one from that templated site. Now, same we did with the SUGCON sites. Remember, we started with the SUGCON Europe site, and then as this was the first event in the year, in April last year, and usually you would start with the smallest website or the least risk website. And we used the SUGCON Europe site directly as a template, so we didn't create a template site because all the sites are so similar in terms of structure, and we just had to replace images and content basically. To do that, XM Cloud supports you in two ways of rolling out your sites. On the one hand, building a template site that you can clone from, or building a site template. Sounds very similar, but is definitely a different approach. Let's take a closer look. So when you build your template site, that means you build a website just as any other site with the most common starting points for all your websites. That can include content architectures, common page designs. You can pre-configure some features already, or like 404 pages, whatever is very common and that you need for all your other sites. And this is usually derived, as mentioned, from your first site implementation. So you copy your first site and then strip it down to what you would call a template. And once your template site is set up, you can run the inbuilt clone site script in the content editor and get an exact copy of with all references readjusted to your new site context. And if you think of rolling out regional websites, for example, you probably also need to support different languages. So there is an additional language, there is an additional script called add site language script that you can run additionally. One note, and some of you know that already, but this is also available in XM and XP. That's not exclusive for XM Cloud, but it's there as well. So it definitely makes sense to know about it. And you will see some of the features that I'm showing here that came with, for example, SXA. So they are available with XM or XP as well, the same way they are now for XM Cloud. I will try to point out whenever this is available for XM and XP as well. All right, talking about the other option, which is the second option, site templating. So here you build a site template, meaning an installation description of a site using modules. And you can reuse the modules that you usually create when creating features or components. So these are installation descriptions for your content architecture and for your feature. And new sites can then be created from XM Cloud sites. So when you create a new site, you get a list of available site templates, as you can see here in the screenshot, and then you just select from one of those options. This is definitely easier to be used by business people. I would say the other option is more something to be used by technologists, meaning developers, administrators. Yeah, right. But there's plenty of more multi-site related features. Let's have an overview first, and then go into each feature separately. So I mentioned already that you can create and manage multiple sites in XM Cloud by using sites and site collections. We have XM Cloud Sites, a new application, or in XM Cloud it exists since a while, which is the dashboard to keep an overview about your large-scale environments. You can configure sites in XM Cloud rather than in configuration files, which is easier to access and easier to maintain. You can use shared sites to share common content and configuration and simplify the maintenance of the website. You can easily link across your sites. We will talk about that. There is the site manager that helps you maintain the routing of your websites and keep an overview there. I mentioned modules, which helps you improving sites with adding new features, but only adding what you really need on a particular site. So it's an activation process of features within a site. And of course, you can create site-related roles that users can only access certain sites and so on. So let's dive a little bit deeper on each of those. As mentioned, XM Cloud Sites is the entry point for marketers and technologists to work on the experiences. So especially in large-scale environments, you can easily find your sites using the embedded search. You can create and manage your sites from here directly, navigate to the XM Cloud page editor, to analytics, to all the different tooling that you have here. You can also enable the shared site feature from here, which we will talk about in a minute, and start sharing content among sites within your site collection. Also in XM Cloud Sites, you can administer your site, managing, for example, the host, languages that should be available, and other site-related settings. This can be done in the site configuration or site definition here in XM Cloud Sites. Within the site context, so talking about shared sites, within the site context, you can create content centrally, so it can be reused within one site. That's a common feature that we've all used in XM and XP before, right? So this simplifies usually content management a lot, because especially when you have to change content, you do that once and it applies wherever it's being used. But sometimes you have content that is used by multiple sites. That can be global marketing content or something like terms and conditions. XM Cloud offers the capability to mark a site as shared and use that content across all sites. And it's not only XM Cloud. Again, this is an SXA feature, so it has been available with SXA in XM and XP. And it's not only content that you can be shared, but also configurational items controlled by developers, something like the component variations that need to be configured, the page and partial designs for common page layouts like blogs or even header, footer, all the styling options offered through the rendering parameters. You can control the component, what components are offered to the marketer through available renderings, and share that configuration across your sites. You can share redirect maps, page templates. Page templates or any kind of templates are anyway shared across site collections. So there's a lot that can be shared using shared sites feature. Talking about cross-site linking, sometimes you need to link across sites. This can always be done using an absolute link, but when a page moves, that absolute link is no longer valid. I mean, you can maintain redirects for sure, but within XM Cloud, same applies for XM and XP, you can link across sites, keeping the relative information and transferring that later on out of the box into the absolute URL using the configured domain. So in XM Cloud, you can mark a site as linkable, so they potentially become visible for other sites as targets to be linked to. And why am I saying potentially? Because per site, you can choose if you only want to see target or site internal pages to link to, or if you also want to see pages of your site collection that have been marked as linkable before, or all the pages within your XM Cloud instance that are marked as linkable. So that's quite a handy feature. Talking about the site manager. So this feature is very well hidden, but within the desktop app of XM Cloud, under PowerShell Toolbox, you can find the site manager. This admin tool helps you to get an overview about routing using different domains, subdomains, or virtual folders. And using those traffic light icons that you can see, or that you can see here in the screenshot on the left side, the site manager indicates whether the site can be accessed through the configured routing. And you can, from here, you can resolve the conflicts by configuring usually a proper host or a virtual folder, or just moving sites up and down in the list, because this is the order of which they are resolved when handling the routing. So if you move a site up that hasn't been wasn't accessible before, then it becomes accessible at a certain point of time. Not a sustainable solution. Again, proper maintenance or configuration of the host is what you should do. Yeah, I talked about modules. So when you build new features that consist usually of several configurational items, such as templates or renderings or media library items, and even some more, they can be bundled into modules, and even multiple components can be bundled into modules. So you can install that module to one or many sites, and that can be done during the site setup, but also at any point in time later. And this way you decouple the deployment from a feature, from the actual activation of a feature within your site or site collection. So the module can be installed either from the site context, so you see what modules have not yet been installed to that particular site, or the other way around. When you take a look at the module itself, you can see what sites are missing that module, and then you can deploy it all in one go, or for whatever sites you want to deploy that. So there's a list of sites that you can check. So that's also pretty handy, managing multiple sites and managing all the features to be installed to multiple sites, or keeping them sites lightweight if they don't require certain features being installed. And again, one that's common across XM and XP and XM Cloud. Usually there are two reasons why you want to apply roles to your site. If you only show to authors and marketers what's relevant to them, they're much more focused and not overwhelmed by the size of the installation. Imagine you have several brands and hundreds of regional sites that you are supporting, and then you have a regional team. It's probably better they just see what they should work on. And the other way around, it's allowing only access to only particular sites mitigates also the risk of having content created in areas it doesn't belong. So XM Cloud supports that, same as XM and XP, by generating standard roles, giving access only to particular sites, and you can later on fine-tune those roles, or of course create roles completely custom, targeted to your particular requirements. But usually you get a good start by just generating the roles that you need. All right, let's go into the next chapter of deploying multi-site solutions. Before we start, maybe let's have an overview about how XM Cloud is architected inside. And XM Cloud consists of several parts we can deploy to. Let's have a closer look on this architecture here. XM Cloud consists of the core application, which is basically your authoring environment, and we are able to customize it through code deployments. However, be very, very careful with that. There are usually more sustainable ways of augmenting your authoring activities. Also, auto updates might break when you change the core functionalities. So if you have the desire to change and deploy code to your authoring environment, please think twice if there is a better way, and usually there is, to handle those. The core application also holds all your items related to your sites. And additionally, XM Cloud contains one or more node-based servers to the so-called editing host that run your head application for the purpose of serving the what you see is what you get editors like XM Cloud pages. It's not scaled, right? Don't run your public traffic on those. It's really just for the editing experience. Because for any public traffic, you want to host your head application on a rendering host. And for sure, different providers have different features, and we will talk about that as well. But usually they all care about scaling out your front-end hosting based on the incoming traffic and then also based on your budget. Your code solution is based on usually or should be based on our XM Cloud Starter Kit containing the code to customize your XM Cloud instance. Again, be very careful with that, but also the item configuration and mostly for the code of your front-end application. Now let's talk about the deployment. When you deploy, you can deploy to the XM Cloud core and deserialize your items, for example, from your solution to the XM Cloud instance to serve the configuration of your features and sites and so on. And additionally, you want your front-end app to stay in sync with your configuration items. So you also deploy your apps to the internal and potentially external editing hosts. Finally, you would deploy your front-end application to the rendering host to change also the public appearance of your web application or website. XM Cloud offers two ways of building your deployment pipeline. There's on the one hand, the out-of-the-box pipeline, or also deploy app or deploy UI, or you build your own custom pipeline using the XM Cloud CLI. Let's again have a closer look. If your scenario is supported, and I will tell you in a minute when it might not be supported, but if it's supported, you should definitely go with the out-of-the-box XM Cloud deploy pipeline or the deploy app. Your project will be connected to your source code repository. Each branch can be hooked up with an environment. So when changes get committed to one of those branches, that will trigger a deployment automatically to the connected environment. It's within the setup process. So it takes you 5 minutes to set it up and you're good to go. It's really easy to set up. We constantly improve that and you're benefiting from all the effort we put in. However, we currently only support GitHub as a source code repository as well as Azure. And we only offer currently node-based editing hosts internally. So if you are using a different repository provider, or if you're using a front-end framework that's not based on Node, then you probably have to go with the second option, which is on that slide. So if you have those different requirements, like I mentioned, but there can be also custom requirements to your pipeline that we are not serving with the deployer, you can definitely set up a custom pipeline to use any tools like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or whatever. And we provide the XM Cloud CLI that offers all the required commands to deploy to the different parts of the XM Cloud architecture. So if you want to orchestrate your own build and deployment pipeline, you can easily do that. We had to create our own pipeline as well using GitHub Actions, because if you remember, we used .NET Core with the MVP side. So that means we have a non-node-based app, and therefore we had to deploy to an external editing host, and that required us to create a custom pipeline, which works perfectly fine because the CLI helps us with those steps. Last but not least, we should talk about the head application hosting. And for sure, you often hear Vercel in the context of XM Cloud. And for sure, Vercel is the maintainer for Next.js. So it's definitely a great choice for hosting your XM Cloud Run head application. And also XM Cloud has a native integration to connect to Vercel, but your requirements are very unique. So rather check the feature set of each provider. Do they offer advanced support for front-end framework features like incremental static generation, middleware, serverless functions, but also how is the developer experience? Very important one. What are the cost connected to the head application hosting? And what about scalability? And if you evaluate for an enterprise setting, make sure to look for security, single sign-on integration, dedicated customer support, and last but not least, weigh out all whatever is important to you and your customer, your requirements, and then choose the right partner for your front-end hosting. So we're coming to an end, and to summarize, when you plan your multi-site implementation, check if you can build one app serving all sites, or if you need to have a dedicated app per site. You can also mix that, as we did. Can you go with the out-of-the-box deployment pipeline, meaning the XM Cloud Deploy app, or do you want to orchestrate a custom pipeline using the XM Cloud CLI? Make use of one of the rollout features using site cloning or site templating, and choose your hosting provider based on your needs. In any way, XM Cloud supports you with multiple, all your scenarios in multiple ways. And with that said, here's a link to my blog that elaborates on that topic, but also provides a list of resources I compiled to create this presentation. For example, you find a video from Rob Earlham about CI/CD pipeline creation with the CLI. There's a link to the XM Cloud introduction repo. So the website we worked on with the MVP side and the SUGCON side, it's all open source. It's not a starter kit for sure, but you can have a look on how we solve things in there. So feel free to check that out. It's all, as I said, open source. There's a video about choosing hosting providers by Thomas Desmond, and plenty of more stuff like our accelerate recipes and so on. So yeah, feel free to check that out. And with that said, thanks a lot. I hope that was valuable time spent for you and you got some takeaways. And I'm open for questions now.
Cool. Sebastian, this was really very good. I have worked upon the multi-site implementation. So I have one question regarding that. You mentioned about there is a PowerShell script we can create the site with that, correct?
Yep.
Site manager. So if I'm creating a website using that, and on other hand, I create a Next.js app on my local and then connect it to Sitecore and create the site using that app, which one will be much more easier way to do?
I personally prefer so you're talking about the site cloning approach versus the site templating approach, right?
Yeah, because if I'm doing a site cloning, then how I can get all the templates and like everything into my source code? That will be a manual work, right?
So when you clone a site, your templates and renderings are not duplicated. It's a site within the same site collection, and they all share that, right? You have a folder with all your page templates that's usually for your site collection. And you have all your renderings anyway outside of any site context. So they are globally available for all your sites. So there's no issue on those. There's no duplication, and you don't have to care about when you clone a site to serialize them back into your source code repository. The only thing you might want to serialize is the new site node that you will get.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what about the components? Is there any way, like, for example, I have site A, site B, and site C. So
yeah.
I need separate app for that. So if I'm cloning a website, do I need a separate app?
It depends on what I showed in the first slide. So if your site is has very different requirements, which I don't believe because you are cloning it from another site, you don't have to create a new app in your solution, right? If it's basically the same and it can be served the same way. For example, you have a regional rollout of a certain brand. All the sites primarily look the same, but of course you have different content on those. Then you just have one app that serves all your sites. You don't even need to reconfigure your site because it's using the same app that you used for the site that you used as a parent, basically, and then you clone it. You clone it from there.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, or?
Yeah, good to know.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is anyone else has any question? So I never encounter cross-site linking. What kind of situation you see that cross-site linking will be required?
That's a good question. So usually all those features were built based on customer requirements, and it's coming out of the. So it's an older feature from the SXA world. If you have sites, so let's say for the SUGCON sites, we have built a new navigation for the SUGCON sites, and then on the top you have linked other sites within the, or even the other SUGCON sites are linked from the umbrella site, for example. So if they are all hosted within the same XMCloud instance, you can now just select, for example, the homepage of the other site without putting an absolute link in there. You can just select the home item, for example. That could be a use case, or if it's another page that should be linked. Of course, if it's outside the XMCloud instance, if the site you want to link outside the XMCloud instance, then that doesn't apply. But yeah, that's one example where not sure if we utilized it, but we could have at that point. Yeah.
Since you said that, we have seen requirements like this component I do not want to show on this particular pages. So basically you can select page item in the multi-list and say exclude from these pages, this component shouldn't be displayed. Now I can expand that, but more than one site if the component is shareable, right?
I think we're talking about different things here. So if we talk about cross-site linking, it's about hyperlinks from one site to another. If we talk about components being available on certain pages or certain sites, we either talk about modules being installed to a certain site, or we talk about placeholder restrictions if we just talk about having certain components available for some pages and some components only available for other pages, right? Maybe on a blog page, you don't need the same components compared to a news page, for example. And then instead of having a long list of all components, you probably configure some placeholder restrictions and say, well, on the placeholder that's available on the blog page, I only want these 3 components. And then also the toolbox usually, well, at least in Experience Editor it was the case, not sure about pages, but the list shrank down to only those components that are available. So that's yeah. In pages, that's I know you can't swap them to the placeholder, but I think they're still listed.
Yeah, that's kind of the page editing mode, but we had some requirement component itself is available in all sites, but it just it's on the site, on the page, but it needs to hide in certain pages. But as you said, it's actually more of linking than not selecting something. So
yeah, cross-site linking is about hyperlinks from one site to another. And if you are in the same XMCloud instance or XM or XP, then you can link an item in another site that's resolved through a different domain or virtual folder or whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Any other questions?
You don't have to be multi-site related. Anything XMCloud, I can try to help.
That's true. All right, Scott shared the link on the chat, so you can go to the site and read through the content. So,
Oh yeah,
all right.
thanks, Scott.
If there is no other question, thanks, Sebastian, for presenting this. This is
You're
really
welcome.
helpful. And we have recorded it and we'll share it in the YouTube channel. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.